On a quiet Sunday morning in a peaceful suburban neighborhood of Virginia, retired CIA intelligence officer Robert Chen was taking his usual morning walk. At 62, he maintained the same disciplined routine that had served him well during his 3 decades of service to his country. The crisp autumn air filled his lungs as he walked past the well-maintained houses with their perfectly manicured lawns. Little did Chen know that this ordinary morning would turn into one of the most challenging situations he'd faced since retiring. As he rounded the corner onto Maple Street, a police cruiser suddenly pulled up beside him, its tires screeching against the asphalt. Officer Thomas Brady, a 15-year veteran of the local police force with a history of civilian complaints, stepped out of his vehicle. "Hey, you! Stop right there!" Brady shouted, his hand already resting on his holster. Chen, drawing from years of training in remaining calm under pressure, stopped and turned slowly. "Sir, is there a problem?" he asked politely, maintaining eye contact while keeping his hands visible. Brady approached aggressively, his face twisted with unwarranted suspicion. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in this area. What are you doing here?" The officer's tone was confrontational, his body language hostile. Chen, who had lived in the neighborhood for over 2 decades, felt a familiar tension rising, one he'd experienced too many times before. "Officer, I live just 3 houses down," Chen explained calmly, gesturing toward his home. "I'm taking my morning walk, as I do every day." But Brady wasn't listening. Instead, he moved closer, his prejudice evident in every word and action. "Show me some ID, now," Brady demanded, his voice rising. Several neighbors began emerging from their homes, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Thompson, who lived across the street and had known Chen for years, watched in horror as the scene unfolded. Chen reached slowly for his wallet, narrating his movements. "I'm reaching for my ID in my back pocket, officer." But before he could retrieve it, Brady suddenly grabbed his arm, twisting it behind his back. The retired intelligence officer's training kicked in, not to fight back, but to protect himself while remaining compliant. "Officer, you're hurting me, and this is unnecessary," Chen stated firmly, his voice steady despite the pain. "I have not only my ID but also my federal credentials." Nearby, someone had started recording the incident on their phone, capturing Brady's increasingly aggressive behavior. The situation escalated when Brady attempted to force Chen to the ground, despite no resistance or threat. Chen, drawing on decades of experience in defusing volatile situations, maintained his composure while clearly stating, "Officer, you are violating my civil rights, and I am not resisting." What Brady didn't know was that Chen had spent years training other federal agents in handling high-pressure situations. As the officer continued his unwarranted aggression, Chen carefully documented every action and word in his mind, a habit from his years of intelligence work. More neighbors gathered, their phones recording the incident. Mrs. Thompson had already called 911, reporting the officer's behavior. "There's an officer assaulting our neighbor, Robert Chen. He's a retired federal agent, and the officer is completely out of control." The morning air, once peaceful, now crackled with tension. Chen's years of training were being put to the ultimate test, not in a foreign operation, but right on his own street. As backup police units approached with sirens wailing, Chen knew this incident would have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved. What happened next would not only shake the local police department to its core but would also spark a national conversation about law enforcement accountability and racial profiling. As Chen stood there, still maintaining his professional composure, he knew this moment would become a catalyst for change, though not in the way anyone might have expected. The story of what transpired that morning would soon capture national headlines, leading to unprecedented consequences for Officer Brady and the entire police department. But for now, as additional police units arrived on the scene, Chen remained focused on one thing: maintaining his dignity while ensuring justice would be served through proper channels. This incident would prove to be just the beginning of a series of events that would challenge not only the local law enforcement's policies but also the community's understanding of justice, respect, and equality under the law. The arrival of backup units marked a dramatic shift in the morning's events. Among the responding officers was Sergeant Jennifer Kumar, a veteran officer known for her level-headed approach and commitment to proper police procedures. As she stepped out of her vehicle, she immediately recognized Chen from several community outreach programs. "Stand down, Brady," Kumar commanded, her authoritative voice cutting through the tension. She had witnessed enough of Brady's behavior through the dash cam footage that was streaming to responding units. The gathering crowd of neighbors, still recording with their phones, watched as Kumar took control of the situation. Chen, despite the painful grip on his arm, maintained his composure. "Sergeant Kumar, good morning," he said calmly, his professional demeanor unwavering. "I believe Officer Brady and I have had a misunderstanding about my morning walk in my own neighborhood." Kumar quickly assessed the situation, noting the unnecessary force being used against a respected community member. "Officer Brady, release Mr. Chen immediately," she ordered. Brady hesitated, his grip tightening momentarily before finally letting go. Chen smoothly adjusted his jacket, his movements deliberate and controlled. As Chen finally presented his identification and federal credentials, the color drained from Brady's face. The realization that he had just assaulted a retired CIA officer in front of multiple witnesses began to sink in. Kumar examined Chen's credentials, though she already knew they were legitimate. "Mr. Chen, would you like to file a formal complaint?" Kumar asked, maintaining professional protocol. The gathered crowd had grown, with many neighbors voicing their support for Chen. Mrs. Thompson stepped forward, her phone still recording. "I have the entire incident on video, and I've already sent it to the local news station," she announced. Chen nodded thoughtfully, years of tactical training evident in his measured response. "Yes, Sergeant Kumar, I would. But more importantly, I believe this incident represents a larger issue that needs to be addressed." His words carried the weight of someone who had spent decades analyzing complex situations. Meanwhile, Brady stood rigid, his earlier aggression replaced by growing anxiety. The arrival of Captain Richards, head of internal affairs, further complicated his situation. Richards had been monitoring the situation through radio communications and arrived personally due to the severity of the incident. "Officer Brady, surrender your badge and weapon," Richards commanded. "You're on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation." The captain's words echoed through the now silent street, marking a significant turning point in the morning's events. As Brady reluctantly complied, Chen engaged in a detailed discussion with Captain Richards and Sergeant Kumar. His years of experience in intelligence gathering became evident as he recounted the incident with precise detail, including specific quotes and timestamps. The neighbors who had witnessed the event began sharing their recordings with the officers, creating multiple angles of evidence. Mrs. Thompson, still visibly upset, provided a passionate account of how she had watched Chen take his morning walks for years, becoming a familiar and respected figure in the community. Local news vans began arriving, drawn by the numerous calls from concerned citizens. Chen, drawing from his media training during his CIA years, knew the importance of controlling the narrative. "Captain Richards," he said quietly, "I believe we have an opportunity here to address systemic issues in a constructive way." The captain nodded, recognizing the potential powder keg the situation represented. Chen's measured response and professional demeanor offered a chance to handle this incident in a way that could lead to positive changes rather than just inflammatory headlines. As the morning progressed, Chen provided a detailed statement to Internal Affairs, his intelligence background evident in his precise recall of events. He emphasized not just Brady's actions, but the larger implications for police training and community relations. Word of the incident spread rapidly through law enforcement channels. By noon, the police chief had called an emergency meeting with community leaders, recognizing the significance of a retired CIA officer being profiled and assaulted by one of his officers. The incident was already trending on social media, with the video clips showing Chen's dignified response in the face of unwarranted aggression drawing particular attention. His handling of the situation would later be used in police training sessions as an example of maintaining composure under pressure. As Chen finally returned home that afternoon, he knew the real work was just beginning. His years in intelligence had taught him that real change requires strategic thinking and careful execution. He began preparing documentation and reaching out to his network of contacts in federal law enforcement and civil rights organizations. The events of that morning had set in motion a chain of events that would reshape the department's approach to community policing. But for Chen, it was about more than just one incident or one officer. It was about creating lasting change in a system that needed serious examination and reform. As news helicopters circled overhead and his phone buzzed with calls from various media outlets, Chen sat down at his desk and began writing. His years of experience in intelligence work had taught him the importance of documentation, and he intended to use this incident as a catalyst for meaningful reform. The following days brought a whirlwind of activity as Chen's incident became the focal point of a broader conversation about police reform. The morning after the confrontation, Chen sat in his home office, reviewing the numerous video recordings that had surfaced online. Each angle revealed new details of Brady's aggressive behavior and Chen's remarkable composure. Local news stations ran the story as their lead, with headlines highlighting the irony of a decorated former CIA officer being profiled in his own neighborhood. Chen's phone hadn't stopped ringing with calls from civil rights organizations, law enforcement reform advocates, and media outlets seeking his perspective on the incident. At the police department, Internal Affairs launched a comprehensive investigation into Brady's service record. What they uncovered was troubling. Multiple complaints had been filed against Brady over the years, many involving similar allegations of racial profiling and excessive force. However, most had been dismissed or buried in bureaucratic procedures. Chen, drawing from his intelligence background, began compiling a detailed dossier. He wasn't just focused on his own incident, he was mapping out a pattern of behavior that suggested systemic issues within the department. His methodical approach, honed through years of intelligence work, proved invaluable in organizing the evidence. The issue isn't just about one officer, Chen explained during a private meeting with Police Chief Rodriguez. It's about the systems that allowed this behavior to continue unchecked. The chief listened intently as Chen presented his findings, including statistical analysis of Brady's past incidents and their handling by the department. Meanwhile, the community response grew stronger. A peaceful gathering organized by local residents drew hundreds of supporters, including many of Chen's former colleagues from various federal agencies. The presence of these retired agents added weight to the situation, transforming it from a local incident into a matter of national interest. Mrs. Thompson, who had become an unexpected ally in the cause, organized a neighborhood watch committee. "What happened to Mr. Chen could have happened to any of us," she said during a community meeting. "We need to ensure our police force serves and protects everyone equally." Chen's approach to handling the situation caught the attention of police reform advocates nationwide. Unlike many similar incidents that devolved into heated confrontations, Chen's measured response and strategic handling of the aftermath provided a template for constructive change. The police department's internal investigation moved with unprecedented speed, largely due to the high-profile nature of the case and Chen's systematic presentation of evidence. Brady's personnel file revealed a history of similar incidents that had been overlooked or downplayed by previous supervisors. 2 weeks after the incident, Chief Rodriguez called a press conference. "Following a thorough investigation, we have terminated Officer Brady's employment with immediate effect," he announced. "Additionally, we are implementing comprehensive reforms in our training and oversight procedures." But Chen knew that firing one officer wouldn't solve the underlying issues. He worked closely with Sergeant Kumar and Captain Richards to develop new training protocols that emphasize de-escalation techniques and cultural sensitivity. His years of experience in handling high-pressure situations provided valuable insights for the reform process. The incident also sparked a review of similar complaints against other officers in the department. Chen's methodical approach to documentation became a model for handling future incidents, with the department adopting many of his suggested protocols for recording and investigating civilian complaints. Local community leaders sought Chen's input on establishing a civilian oversight committee. His unique perspective as both a law enforcement veteran and a victim of profiling made him an ideal advisor for bridging the gap between police and community concerns. The media coverage shifted from focusing solely on the incident to highlighting the constructive changes it had sparked. Chen's diplomatic handling of the situation earned praise from both law enforcement officials and civil rights advocates, proving that meaningful reform was possible through collaboration rather than confrontation. As the weeks passed, Chen's case became a catalyst for change beyond the local level. Police departments across the state began reviewing their own procedures and training protocols. The incident was incorporated into police academy training programs as a case study in both what to avoid and how to properly handle civilian encounters. The surveillance footage from that morning became a powerful training tool, showing the stark contrast between Brady's aggressive approach and Chen's professional response. Training officers used it to demonstrate the importance of maintaining composure and respecting civilian rights, regardless of personal biases. Chen's experience in intelligence work proved invaluable in documenting and presenting evidence of systemic issues within the department. His detailed analysis helped identify patterns that might have otherwise gone unnoticed, leading to more comprehensive reforms than initially planned. As the third week drew to a close, Chen received an unexpected call from the governor's office. His handling of the incident and its aftermath had caught the attention of state officials, who were interested in implementing similar reforms across all police departments in the state. The story was far from over, but the groundwork for meaningful change had been laid. Chen's strategic approach to addressing systemic issues, combined with his unique background and composed demeanor, had transformed a potentially volatile situation into an opportunity for positive reform. 1 month after the incident, Chen found himself standing before a special session of the state legislature, preparing to testify about his experience and the broader implications for law enforcement reform. The chamber was packed with lawmakers, media representatives, and concerned citizens, all eager to hear from the retired CIA officer who had turned a confrontational incident into a catalyst for change. Before taking the podium, Chen glanced at his prepared notes, though he hardly needed them. His years of delivering intelligence briefings to top government officials had prepared him well for this moment. However, this time was different. He wasn't just presenting facts, he was sharing a deeply personal experience that had implications for countless others. Distinguished members of the legislature, Chen began, his voice steady and clear. What happened to me that morning could have ended very differently. My training helped me maintain composure, but not everyone has that advantage. Today, I'm here to discuss how we can prevent similar incidents and build trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve. As Chen spoke, screens behind him displayed statistics and footage from similar incidents across the state. His presentation was methodical, backed by data he had gathered with help from civil rights organizations and law enforcement agencies. The legislators leaned forward in their seats, captivated by his balanced approach to a typically polarizing issue. Meanwhile, back in Chen's community, the changes he had helped implement were already showing promising results. Sergeant Kumar, now promoted to lieutenant, had taken charge of the department's newly established Community Relations Unit. The unit's first initiative was a series of town hall meetings where officers and residents could engage in open dialogue. Mr. Chen's incident opened our eyes to blind spots in our training, Lieutenant Kumar explained during one such meeting. We're now implementing protocols that emphasize de-escalation and cultural awareness. The community's response was cautiously optimistic, with many residents noting visible changes in how officers conducted their daily patrols. The investigation into Brady's past conduct had led to the reopening of several previously dismissed complaints. A special task force, formed at Chen's suggestion, was reviewing years of incident reports to identify patterns of discriminatory behavior among other officers. The findings would prove crucial in developing new accountability measures. Back at the state capitol, Chen's testimony had sparked intense discussion among lawmakers. His recommendation for a statewide database to track officer conduct and civilian complaints gained particular attention. "We need transparency and accountability," he emphasized. Without proper documentation and oversight, patterns of misconduct can go unnoticed for years. The media coverage of Chen's testimony reached national networks, drawing attention to his unique approach to police reform. Unlike many high-profile incidents that ended in bitter legal battles, Chen's case was becoming a model for constructive change through collaboration and systematic reform. Mrs. Thompson, who had become the chairperson of the newly formed Civilian Oversight Committee, organized viewing sessions of Chen's testimony in the community center. "Look at how he's turning his experience into something positive," she commented to the gathered residents. "He's not just fighting against something, he's fighting for better policing for everyone." As Chen's influence grew, he received invitations to speak at police academies across the state. His presentations focused not just on preventing discrimination, but on building positive relationships between law enforcement and diverse communities. Cadets were particularly impressed by his ability to analyze situations from both a law enforcement and civilian perspective. The governor's office announced the formation of a special commission to implement Chen's recommendations statewide. Chen was asked to serve as a special advisor, bringing his intelligence background and recent experience to bear on developing new policies and procedures for law enforcement agencies. Local businesses and community organizations rallied behind the reform efforts. The Chamber of Commerce sponsored cultural awareness workshops for police officers, while local churches and community centers hosted dialogue sessions between residents and law enforcement representatives. Chen's home became an unofficial meeting place for various stakeholders in the reform process. His dining room table, where he had once analyzed intelligence reports, now hosted discussions between police officials, civil rights advocates, and community leaders. His ability to bring diverse perspectives together proved as valuable in civilian life as it had been in his CIA career. The reforms began showing measurable results. Civilian complaints decreased, while positive interactions between officers and residents increased. The department's new training protocols, influenced by Chen's experience in handling high-pressure situations, were being studied by law enforcement agencies nationwide. As the fourth month since the incident approached, Chen received word that his case and the resulting reforms would be featured in a national law enforcement journal. The article would focus not just on the incident itself, but on how his strategic approach to reform had created lasting positive change. But for Chen, the most significant impact was visible in his daily morning walks. Officers now patrolling the neighborhood would stop to chat with residents, building the kind of community relationships that prevent incidents like the one he had experienced. It was a small but meaningful sign that real change was possible. The story continued to evolve, with each development adding new layers to the ongoing discussion about police reform. Chen's experience had shown that meaningful change required more than just policy adjustments, it needed committed individuals willing to bridge divides and work toward common goals. 6 months after the incident, Chen's reform initiatives had gained momentum beyond anyone's expectations. The state governor invited him to lead a special task force focused on modernizing police training programs across all departments. The morning he received the official appointment letter, Chen sat in his study, reflecting on how a single confrontation had snowballed into a statewide movement for change. The police department's transformation was evident in daily operations. Lieutenant Kumar's community relations unit had become a model for other precincts. Officers now wore body cameras that automatically activated during civilian interactions, a direct result of Chen's recommendations. The footage was regularly reviewed by the Civilian Oversight Committee, ensuring transparency and accountability. One particularly impactful change was the introduction of the Chen Protocol, a set of guidelines for officer behavior during civilian encounters. Named in his honor, though he had modestly objected, the protocol emphasized de-escalation techniques and respect for civilian rights. Every interaction should begin with respect, Chen explained during a training session. Authority doesn't mean abandoning humanity. The investigation into Brady's past had uncovered a network of institutional problems. Several senior officers who had previously dismissed complaints against Brady faced disciplinary action. The department's Internal Affairs Division underwent a complete restructuring, with new policies requiring external review of all serious complaints. Chen's morning walks now took on new meaning. Officers patrolling the neighborhood would often stop to chat, not out of suspicion but genuine community engagement. Residents noticed the change, with many reporting feeling more secure knowing that law enforcement was working with, rather than against, the community. Mrs. Thompson's Civilian Oversight Committee had grown into a powerful voice for community concerns. Their monthly meetings, once sparsely attended, now drew crowds of engaged citizens and officers alike. "We're building bridges," she often said, "and Mr. Chen showed us how to do it right." The reforms caught the attention of civil rights organizations nationwide. Chen found himself traveling to different cities, sharing his experience and helping other communities implement similar changes. His background in intelligence work proved invaluable in designing systematic approaches to reform that could be adapted to different environments. Local schools began inviting police officers for regular interaction with students, breaking down barriers that often led to misunderstandings. Chen occasionally joined these sessions, sharing his story and emphasizing the importance of mutual respect between law enforcement and civilians. The department's training academy underwent a complete overhaul. New recruits now spent significant time in community engagement before receiving their badges. Chen's incident became a mandatory case study, with officers learning both what went wrong and how proper handling could turn even negative situations into opportunities for positive change. As summer approached, the department organized its first community police festival, an idea born from one of Chen's town hall meetings. The event brought together officers and residents for a day of activities, food, and open dialogue. Children played basketball with officers, while adults engaged in meaningful conversations about community safety. Chen's influence extended to policy making. State legislators consulted him regularly on proposed law enforcement reforms. His ability to balance security needs with civil rights protection made him a valuable advisor. "We need both effective policing and protected rights," he would often say. "They're not mutually exclusive." The media continued to follow the story's evolution. A national news magazine featured Chen's reforms in a cover story titled, "The Chen Effect: How One Man's Experience Changed Policing." The article highlighted how his measured response and strategic approach had created lasting positive change. Technology played a crucial role in the reforms. The department implemented a new digital system for tracking officer interactions and civilian complaints, making it easier to identify potential problems before they escalated. Chen's CIA experience with data analysis helped design the system for maximum effectiveness while protecting privacy rights. The changes weren't without challenges. Some officers initially resisted the new protocols, viewing them as restrictions on their authority. Chen worked closely with police union representatives, demonstrating how the reforms could actually make their jobs safer and more effective. Lieutenant Kumar's promotion to captain marked another milestone in the department's transformation. As the first woman of color to achieve this rank in the department's history, her advancement symbolized the changing culture Chen had helped initiate. Community involvement in policing reached new heights. Neighborhood watch programs, coordinated with police patrols, created an effective partnership for maintaining public safety. Regular forums allowed residents to voice concerns and suggestions directly to law enforcement leadership. The Chin Protocol began spreading to other states, with police departments nationwide requesting training materials and implementation guidance. Chin found himself conducting weekly video conferences with law enforcement leaders across the country, sharing insights and helping adapt the protocols to different communities. As the 6th month drew to a close, Chin received news that would take his reform efforts to the national level. The federal law enforcement training centers expressed interest in incorporating his protocols into their standard curriculum. This development promised to influence police training across the entire country. The transformation that had begun with one confrontational morning had grown into a movement for positive change in law enforcement. Chen's strategic approach, combining his intelligence background with a deep understanding of community needs, had created a model for reform that worked for both police and civilians. 1 year after the incident, Chen's reform initiatives had reached the national stage. The Federal Law Enforcement Training Center had fully integrated the Chen Protocol into its curriculum, and police departments across the country were reporting positive results from implementing his methods. The morning's events that had once threatened to divide a community had instead become a blueprint for nationwide change. Chen received an invitation to address the International Conference on Police Reform in Washington, D.C. As he prepared his presentation in his study, he reflected on how his CIA training in analyzing complex situations had helped him transform a personal confrontation into systemic improvement. The local police department had become a case study in successful reform. Crime rates had decreased while community satisfaction with law enforcement reached record highs. Captain Kumar's innovative approaches to community policing had earned the department national recognition, with other cities sending officers to learn from their example. The digital tracking system Chen helped design had identified and prevented numerous potential incidents of misconduct. Officers initially skeptical of the increased oversight now appreciated how the system protected them from false accusations while helping them improve their performance. "It's like having a coach watching your game films," one veteran officer commented during a training session. Mrs. Thompson's Civilian Oversight Committee had expanded its role beyond just reviewing complaints. They now actively participated in officer training, sharing community perspectives and helping build understanding between residents and law enforcement. Their monthly meetings had become a model for productive dialogue between police and civilians. The state legislature passed the Law Enforcement Accountability and Community Trust Act, largely based on Chen's recommendations. The law mandated body cameras, civilian oversight, and comprehensive tracking of officer conduct across all departments. Chen served as a key advisor during the bill's development, ensuring it balanced effective law enforcement with civil rights protection. Local schools had incorporated elements of the Chen Protocol into their curriculum, teaching students about their rights while fostering respect for law enforcement. Officers regularly visited classrooms, building relationships with young people that would help prevent future confrontations. Chen occasionally joined these sessions, sharing his story and emphasizing the importance of mutual understanding. The department's annual Community Police Festival had grown into a major event, drawing participants from neighboring cities. Officers and residents competed in friendly sports tournaments, shared meals, and engaged in open discussions about community safety. The festival symbolized the transformed relationship between police and civilians. Chen's morning walks had become informal community gatherings. Neighbors would join him, discussing local issues and sharing ideas for further improvements. Officers on patrol would stop to chat, demonstrating the new culture of openness and communication that had replaced the old adversarial approach. The media continued documenting the success of Chen's reforms. A documentary filmmaker followed the department for several months, capturing the daily impact of the changes. The resulting film, Walking Together, The Chen Protocol Story, was selected for several prestigious film festivals. Technology continued playing a crucial role in the reforms. The department launched a mobile app allowing residents to easily communicate with officers, report concerns, and access community resources. The app, designed with input from both police and civilians, helped maintain transparency and build trust. Chen's influence extended to police union negotiations nationwide. His approach showed how reforms could benefit both officers and communities, helping bridge the gap between union concerns and civilian oversight. Several major cities consulted him during contract negotiations, leading to agreements that protected both officer and civilian rights. The success of the reforms attracted international attention. Law enforcement officials from several countries visited to study the Chen Protocol and its implementation. Chen found himself conducting workshops for police leaders from Europe, Asia, and South America, helping adapt his methods to different cultural contexts. Captain Kumar's promotion to deputy chief marked another milestone in the department's transformation. Her leadership style, combining firm authority with community sensitivity, perfectly embodied the principles Chen had helped establish. Under her guidance, the department continued innovating in community policing methods. The Civilian Oversight Committee expanded its role to include preventive measures. They worked with officers to identify potential problems before they escalated, using data analysis and community feedback to improve police practices continuously. Their success led to similar programs in other cities. Chen's work began influencing police academy training nationwide. New recruits learned about the importance of cultural sensitivity, de-escalation techniques, and community engagement from day one. The incident that had started it all became a cornerstone case study in police training programs across the country. As the one-year mark approached, Chen received news that would take his reforms to an even broader stage. The United Nations had invited him to participate in a global conference on law enforcement best practices. His experience would help shape international standards for police conduct and community relations. The transformation that began with one confrontational morning had evolved into a movement changing law enforcement practices worldwide. Chen's strategic approach, combining his intelligence background with deep understanding of community needs, had created a model for reform that transcended cultural and national boundaries. The story continued to evolve, but its core message remained constant. Positive change was possible when people worked together with respect, understanding, and a commitment to improvement. Chen's experience had shown that even the most challenging situations could become opportunities for meaningful reform. 18 months after the incident, Chen's reform initiatives had achieved international recognition. His upcoming address to the United Nations Conference on Law Enforcement Practices had generated significant interest from countries worldwide. The morning he received the official UN invitation, Chen sat in his garden, remembering how a single confrontation had sparked a global movement for change. The local police department had become a global model for reform. Delegations from police forces around the world regularly visited to study their methods. Captain Kumar, now deputy chief, had developed a comprehensive training program to share their experiences with other departments. What we learned from Mr. Chen changed not just our procedures, but our entire approach to policing, she often explained to visitors. The Chen Protocol had been translated into 12 languages and implemented in police departments across 5 continents. Its success in reducing confrontations while improving community relations had caught the attention of international law enforcement agencies. Chen worked with translators to ensure the protocol's principles remained effective across cultural boundaries. The digital oversight system Chen helped design had prevented countless potential incidents. Its success led to the development of an international database for tracking police conduct, allowing departments worldwide to share data and best practices. Privacy protections and ethical guidelines, carefully crafted with Chen's input, ensured the system served its intended purpose without abuse. Mrs. Thompson's Civilian Oversight Committee had evolved into a national training center for community policing initiatives. Police departments and civilian groups from across the country sent representatives to learn their methods. The committee's success showed how civilian oversight could strengthen rather than hinder effective law enforcement. The state's Law Enforcement Accountability Act had inspired similar legislation in other states and countries. Chen frequently testified before legislative bodies, sharing his experience in helping craft effective reforms. His ability to balance security needs with civil rights protection made him a valued advisor to lawmakers worldwide. Local schools had expanded their police community programs into a comprehensive curriculum adopted by districts nationwide. Students learned about their rights and responsibilities while developing positive relationships with law enforcement. The program's success in preventing youth police confrontations led to its implementation in schools internationally. The Community Police Festival had grown into an international event, drawing participants from around the world. Officers and civilians shared experiences, discussed challenges, and celebrated successes in building better police-community relations. The festival became a symbol of how Chen's experience had transformed law enforcement culture globally. Chen's morning walks now included visitors from various countries eager to learn from his experience. These informal discussions often led to valuable insights about adapting reform principles to different cultural contexts. Officers from the local department would join these walks, demonstrating the new model of community policing in action. The media coverage had expanded to include international outlets. A major streaming service announced plans for a documentary series examining how Chen's reforms had influenced law enforcement worldwide. The series would feature implementations of the Chen Protocol in different countries and cultures. Technology continued playing a vital role in the reforms. The department's mobile app had been adapted for use in other cities and countries, with modifications to suit local needs. The app's success in facilitating police community communication led to its adoption by law enforcement agencies worldwide. Chen's work with police unions had helped create a new model for labor relations in law enforcement. Unions and reform advocates, often seen as adversaries, found common ground in improving officer training and community relations. The approach spread internationally, helping police organizations worldwide balance officer rights with accountability. The success of the reforms attracted attention from international organizations beyond law enforcement. Human rights groups, civil society organizations, and government agencies sought Chen's advice on implementing similar changes in their fields. His experience showed how systematic reform could create positive change in various contexts. Deputy Chief Kumar's innovative leadership had earned international recognition. Her implementation of the Chen Protocol became a case study in police administration courses worldwide. Under her guidance, the department continued developing new approaches to community-oriented policing that influenced law enforcement globally. The Civilian Oversight Committee's role had expanded to include international consulting. They helped other communities establish effective oversight programs, sharing lessons learned from their experience. Their success demonstrated how civilian participation could improve law enforcement effectiveness worldwide. Chen's influence on police training had reached global proportions. Police academies worldwide incorporated his principles into their basic training. The incident that sparked these changes was studied by law enforcement trainees across the globe, teaching valuable lessons about professionalism and community relations. As the 18-month mark approached, Chen received an unexpected honor. The International Police Chiefs Association announced the creation of the Chen Award for Excellence in Community Policing, recognizing departments that successfully implemented comprehensive reforms. The transformation that began in a suburban neighborhood had become a worldwide movement for positive change in law enforcement. Chen's strategic approach, combining professional expertise with deep understanding of human dynamics, had created a model for reform that worked across cultural and national boundaries. The story continued evolving, reaching new communities and inspiring further innovations in law enforcement. Chen's experience had shown that meaningful reform was possible when people committed to working together with respect and understanding, regardless of their background or location. 2 years after the incident, Chen sat in his study preparing for his final public address before retiring from active involvement in police reform. The United Nations Conference had marked the peak of his international influence, but he knew the real work would continue through the thousands of people he had helped train and inspire. The local police department had been certified as an international training center for community policing. Deputy Chief Kumar, recently nominated for Chief of Police, had developed training programs that attracted law enforcement leaders from around the world. The Chen Protocol isn't just about procedures, she would explain, it's about changing the entire culture of policing. The incident that started it all had become required study in police academies worldwide. Training officers used it to demonstrate both what could go wrong and how proper handling could transform a crisis into an opportunity. Brady, the former officer whose actions sparked these changes, had ironically become a cautionary tale in police training manuals. Mrs. Thompson's Civilian Oversight Committee had grown into a global consulting organization. They helped communities worldwide establish effective police oversight programs, always emphasizing Chen's principles of mutual respect and understanding. Their success proved that civilian oversight could strengthen rather than weaken law enforcement effectiveness. The digital tracking system had evolved into an international standard for police accountability. Departments worldwide used variations of the system, sharing data and best practices while maintaining strict privacy protections. The system's success in preventing misconduct while protecting officer rights had made it an essential tool in modern policing. Chen's morning walks had become legendary in law enforcement circles. Visitors from around the world would join him, discussing challenges and solutions in their own communities. These informal conversations often led to breakthrough insights in adapting reform principles to different cultural contexts. The Community Police Festival had transformed into an annual international conference on law enforcement reform. Representatives from police departments worldwide gathered to share experiences and learn from each other. The festival's success showed how Chen's approach could bridge cultural and national differences. Local schools had expanded their police community programs into a comprehensive curriculum used in educational systems worldwide. Students learned about rights, responsibilities, and the importance of mutual respect between civilians and law enforcement. The program's success in preventing confrontations made it a model for educational systems globally. The media continued documenting the lasting impact of Chen's reforms. The documentary series about the global influence of the Chen Protocol had won several international awards. Its success helped spread awareness of effective police reform methods to audiences worldwide. Technology remained crucial to the reform's success. The department's mobile app had been adapted for use in countless communities worldwide, facilitating communication between police and civilians. Its effectiveness in building trust and preventing confrontations made it an essential tool in modern policing. Chen's work with police unions had created a new paradigm for labor relations in law enforcement. Unions worldwide adopted his approach, finding ways to protect officer rights while maintaining accountability. The success of these programs showed how reform could benefit both officers and communities. Deputy Chief Kumar's promotion to Chief of Police marked the final step in the department's transformation. Her leadership style, combining firm authority with community sensitivity, embodied the principles Chen had helped establish. Under her guidance, the department continued innovating in community policing methods. The Civilian Oversight Committee's influence had spread globally. Their methods for building trust between police and communities had been adapted for use in various cultural contexts. Their success showed how civilian participation could improve law enforcement effectiveness worldwide. As Chen prepared for his final address, he reflected on how a single confrontational morning had sparked worldwide change. The reforms had succeeded because they addressed fundamental human needs for respect, understanding, and fair treatment. The Chen effect, as it had become known in law enforcement circles, demonstrated how positive change could spread from a single incident to influence practices worldwide. His strategic approach, combining professional expertise with deep understanding of human dynamics, had created a model for reform that transcended cultural and national boundaries. The International Police Chiefs Association's Chen Award had become one of the most prestigious honors in law enforcement. Departments worldwide competed to demonstrate excellence in community policing, driving continuous improvement in police-community relations. Chen's final public appearance would be at the graduation ceremony of the International Police Academy, where he would address a new generation of officers trained in his methods. His message remained consistent: effective law enforcement requires respect, understanding, and commitment to serving the community. As he reviewed his notes for the graduation speech, Chen smiled at how far things had come. The confrontation that could have ended tragically had instead sparked a global movement for positive change in law enforcement. His experience had shown that even the most challenging situations could become opportunities for meaningful reform. The story of the retired CIA officer and the racist cop had transformed into a blueprint for worldwide police reform. Chen's legacy would live on through the thousands of officers and communities trained in his methods, continuing to build bridges between law enforcement and the public they serve.